Something is wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, just wrong enough that a reasonable person would mention it. But you won't. You'll wait. You'll downplay it. You'll apologize for bringing it up if you do. And if someone asks how you are, you'll say fine, because saying anything else feels like an imposition, like you're making your problem someone else's problem, and that is somehow worse than just carrying it yourself in silence. This isn't weakness. It isn't lack of self-awareness. It's a specific psychological pattern with a very long history, and once you understand where it actually came from, you'll see it operating in yourself and everyone around you in ways you never noticed before. The phrase stiff upper lip has been traced back to Victorian Britain, but it was the two world wars that baked it into something closer to a national identity. Showing emotion in a crisis wasn't just frowned upon, it was actively framed as a threat to collective survival. Keep calm, carry on. Don't let your distress become someone else's distraction. For generations, emotional restraint wasn't a personal preference, it was a social contract. And social contracts get passed down, not through explicit instruction, but through the thousand small signals that teach a child what kind of emotional behavior is acceptable and what kind makes the people around them uncomfortable. You don't learn "don't be a burden" as a rule, you learn it as a feeling. A specific, physical reluctance to reach out that sits somewhere between your ribcage and your throat and convinces you, every time, that your need isn't quite significant enough to justify mentioning. Research on this pattern finds something genuinely surprising. People who consistently suppress emotional expression, psychologists call them repressors, actually score higher on emotional intelligence tests than people who express freely. They're not unaware of what they're feeling, they're extraordinarily aware of it. What they're doing is making a constant, active, effortful calculation about whether the social cost of expressing it is worth it. And they've been making that calculation so long, it feels automatic. The problem the research also consistently identifies is what happens when that calculation goes wrong in the long run. Repressors seek help later than almost any other personality type, not because they're fine, but because not being fine enough to mention it becomes its own standard that keeps getting raised. Simply Health research found that roughly 2.7 million British adults are living with daily health concerns they haven't mentioned to anyone. The average person waits over 2 weeks to see a GP for something genuinely bothering them, not because they're busy, because going feels like making a fuss. And this extends far beyond physical health. The same pattern that stops someone mentioning a pain that's been there for a week also stops them admitting to a friend that they're struggling, that they're lonely, that they're not actually fine. The loneliness research on this is stark. People don't connect deeply because vulnerability feels like neediness, and neediness feels like the worst thing you could make someone think of you. Here's what makes this pattern so hard to interrupt. It doesn't feel like repression from the inside. It feels like consideration, like not wanting to impose, like being someone who handles their own problems rather than spreading them around. These are socially valued traits, which is exactly why the pattern is so stable and so invisible. You're not suppressing your needs because you're scared. You're suppressing them because you've genuinely internalized the idea that other people's peace of mind matters more than your own discomfort. The psychology of not wanting to be a burden isn't a character flaw or a uniquely British failing. It's what happens when generations of people are taught, through culture, through schooling, through the specific way adults responded to their emotions as children, that the appropriate amount of space to take up is smaller than the amount of space they actually need. You are allowed to need things. You're allowed to mention them without apologizing for it first. The people who care about you are not waiting for you to finally be too broken to manage alone. They're just waiting for you to say something true.